Hey there, this is Noah from Skillet AI. I am super excited to share this walkthrough of the latest meeting scheduler project workflow that we've built. This solves a huge pain point, which is all of the coordination and back and forth that's required when you get an email and someone says, hey, let's book time together, and you have to check your calendar and send them options and wait for the reply and then recheck and then send the invite, and it's multiple steps. So you'll see that we are relying on some really well-placed OpenAI calls, some Google Calendar calls, and a lot of this back and forth actually is getting managed for you. So let's jump right in. I'm going to walk you through all the nodes that are in this workflow so that you get a sense of what you need to build. So the first thing that we do is we receive an email. We basically want to check our Google account, our Gmail account every minute, and some of those emails might have nothing to do with scheduling a meeting. So we're running a pre-filter. We don't want to rely solely on OpenAI API calls. They're costly. I don't know, maybe 10% of my emails, maybe less, maybe 5% of my emails require that a meeting gets scheduled. So this first code block is basically a pre-filter. It's checking for all these different keyword matches, and if anything in here matches, it's going to say, oh, this probably needs a meeting. But we're not relying solely on this. This is just code. It's not AI. It's not intelligent. So we have one option to filter out emails that don't pass here, but then we want to do a real classification with an AI model. So here we're explaining you're an email classifier. You need to determine if there's a meeting needed, yes or no. And essentially when this runs, what you get as an output, I shouldn't have hit execute, this is going to take too long, but what you essentially get as an output is a meeting needed, and did they even offer times, right? So what it's trying to do is if the person says, hey, let's get a meeting, by the way, are you free Tuesday at noon? It's going to actually put in these proposed times. And then it's going through, it's formatting the options. There's a ton of these little helper functions. This is formatting the options. Again, did it determine a meeting was needed? If it didn't, this is going to end again. So these are like terminal points. But if it does need a meeting, well, let's check the calendar. So here we're using Google Calendar. We're basically checking to see what slots are already filled. This is going to hand us back a whole list of filled time slots. Basically, all the meetings on your calendar that are already there are going to show up in that list. And then this is probably the most important node in the entire project. This is generate slots. There's a ton of code in here. You can reuse this code. You don't have to write it yourself. This is doing the heavy lift of defining your work week, figuring out the hours that you're open. It iterates through all the different slots that were taken, that we passed in from Google Calendar. It even looks at the slots that were proposed when people may or may not have offered up sometimes. And then it generates up to 5 slots to offer up. Those 5 slots, again, get properly formatted. This is a set node. We're just structuring the data so it's really easy to use. And then here we're having OpenAI write an email, right? We don't want to just sound like a machine saying, here are the slots. So this just sort of wraps the email with a little bit of nicety. It ends up writing with a friendlier tone. It thanks the person. It offers them the options. But the most important thing is it's not just saying, hey, I'm free on Monday at noon. It's saying, here's the 5 times that I'm free. And each one of those times is actually a hyperlink, right? It's a link that when the person clicks, it's sending a bunch of code so that we know which link they clicked and we can handle that appropriately, right? So just because we're using that here, there's a ton of other ways that you could use that type of solution where you're building options, you're emailing the options to a person, and then based on what they select, we're then having a whole second part of our workflow handle their response. So this is another really important node for doing that, but we're able to do that because we're passing in all the right structure. So you can see in the user prompt, we're passing in a ton of data, and that's all the data that the system needs to structure those URLs correctly. And then the email that gets sent, pretty straightforward. It's taking all of the stuff that's been sent to it, and this is not a new email, this is a reply, so we have to send in the message thread from the original Gmail node, and then we're just passing in the HTML that was written by OpenAI. This one's pretty straightforward. All right, so the email that comes out of here has these options available, and based on which one you click, that's what hits the webhook. I'm just going to quickly open up my email and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is an example of what these emails look like. It shows these choices, and you can see at the very bottom of the screen down here, it shows like a preview. These choices have a bunch of key value pairs tied to them. What's the slot? What's the thread ID? Who's the recipient? What's their email? That's how we can have this get set up correctly. And essentially, we have a webhook down here. And what this webhook is doing is it's just waiting for someone to click one of those links. When the link gets clicked, it unpacks all that data. And then with that data, it's able to process everything else that happened. All right, so what are we doing down here? We're getting the webhook, we're extracting the information from it, we are rechecking the calendar. So this is very similar to before. We're saying, hey, what availability do I have in the calendar? Is the meeting that we just tried to book, is it still free, or maybe it got booked over? Maybe it took someone too long to reply and your calendar filled up. If it's still free, it goes on this top track, and then it goes ahead and it schedules the invite. So what are we doing to schedule it? We're passing in the start time. We're passing in the end time. We're passing in the recipient, the person who emailed you in your own email. We're showing it as busy on our calendar. And then we had ChatGPT come up with a description of what the calendar invite is about. Is it to go for a bike ride? Is it a work meeting? Is it, whatever it might be? That's getting pulled in as summary, which is the event title. So this node actually generates the calendar invite. We then pass all the information into ChatGPT, and we basically say, hey, help us write a friendly email that confirms the meeting was booked, states the time, says something like looking forward to it, and then signs the email. That gets sent as the email, and we're done. Great. The person got the email, we sent them times, they responded, we booked it, we said, we're all set. Okay, but if the time that they picked ended up being booked, it's no longer free, that's going to evaluate false rate. And then what we're going to do is basically reproduce these two nodes from before, where we're checking the calendar and we're generating time slots. We're doing that again because we have to resend new times. So down here, we recheck the calendar, we regenerate time slots, and then this is sort of a similar email to what we wrote before, but it just opens up a little bit different because it says, it apologizes, hey, that slot was already booked, let me offer up new times. All right, so this even is third logical branch that says, well, hold on, maybe there was a problem. We have to kind of rethink. So what this ends up doing is it basically reruns this webhook. This could run over and over. If you keep sending new times, they keep filling up. You keep sending more times. So it kind of got some circular logic. All right, but that's it. This is not a simple build. I tried to break it down and make it as easy as possible, but there's just a ton of steps. There's a ton of logic. I would say, again, this generates slot. There's a lot going on in here. We're also being pretty sophisticated in how we're using OpenAI because we're really not just chatting with it. We're sending it a very specific ask. We're insisting that it sends us back a very specific output that has to be structured a very specific way. And then really what our prompts are, you're just sending it all this structured data. So if you're not a programmer, that might be a little bit intimidating, but again, you can download the file, you can work with what's here, and there is a longer video that goes through all of it. But overall, super, super powerful. As I mentioned before, part of what's embedded in here is some really applicable lessons that can be used elsewhere. So how do you embed really smart code within your n8n workflows? How do you use if statements to create these logical gates? How do you use helper functions outside of your main steps to properly format and sort of structure the data? How do you use more sophisticated prompting with both a system prompt and a user prompt? And then most importantly, how do you send messages to humans that have multiple options that they can choose, and you've basically coded different links for different options so that you can set up a webhook and it knows, did the person choose option A, option B, option C? That in itself has so many other applications. So this one is chock full of tons of really good value. Give it a try. Hopefully this is a big unlock for you. It should hopefully free up your time and essentially give you a secretary or a personal assistant, the one you've always wanted. Now you can have it with n8n.